All right, so welcome Danny Desatnik to the Scholarly Flow. We're so excited to have you here, man. I mean, it's really cool how these worlds are colliding. We met at a previous job, and after that, our friendship kind of blossomed. I think you and I had a recurring meeting every 2 weeks or so, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I remember that being, and I felt like I had that with so much of the company. Like there were definitely some cool people at the company, but we were so disparate, especially because it was remote. And it was nice when you came in, and I don't know how I heard you were into music. Maybe like I reached out to you the first time or the first week you were there. Anyway, we found out we were into music, and whenever I find out someone's into music, it's an automatic recurring meeting on the calendar for sure. Um,
It breaks any type of ice that might have been there before.
It's crazy, man. The amount of times that I've been out, either at a party or just in the world or wherever I am, and I start talking to someone about music, and they also love music, regardless if we like the same stuff, but we start talking about it. And then someone else within the environment of the party was like, "Oh, how do you guys know each other?" And it's like, "No, we don't." Like, just jamming on this thing that we're both so passionate about. And I feel like it'll happen in many other categories as well, but music is just so universal. Like it's so feeling based that even if you like punk rock and I love trap, like there is still things that we can connect on and talk about for hours. And so yeah,
Yeah.
Ramon, when you came to hashtag paid, anytime I heard that there was a music fan, there was an automatic friendship slot happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are so many things that we could talk about today. I know you're an expert in the creator economy, currently running partnerships over at Creator Camp, which is a collective building a new path for internet filmmakers. But the project we're really excited to talk to you about today is Playlist Storytellers, an event that brings together music and narratives. So I think what I want to do is talk about the Playlist Storytellers event that I had a chance to attend, and then just kind of dissect your approach to building an event like that, how you see music and storytelling coming together, and all of the pieces that we can kind of break apart further.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yes. So the last Playlist Storytellers was in December, right?
Yeah, December 5th, New York, Earshot Studios, kind of Soho, like 55-person audience, five pre-selected storytellers.
Yeah, so the storytellers were Neka Julia, Hunter Prosper, Blake Kassemeyer, Melinda Hanson, and Kyle McCarthy. And so some of these folks are really heavy-hitting creators. And so when I saw, for example, Hunter Prosper and Neka Julia on the bill, and I was realizing that they're going to tell a personal story about their life that relates to music, I was really excited. So how did that all come together?
I guess because I've been in the creator space for a while and specifically working at Creator Camp, like 4 out of the 5 storytellers there are creators. Um, I knew Blake from before Creator Camp. He was someone that I actually had on my podcast when I ran that creator podcast at hashtag paid.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by that guy.
Which I got to
Um,
see live too.
Say that again.
I said, which I also got to see.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And he's just been I've been a friend of his, he's been a friend of mine. I'm a huge fan of his. And Blake is the epitome of playlist storytellers. Like if you look at how he started, I think he had a series called Songs That Saved My Life. And he'll always intertwine music stories and he'll always intertwine music facts. It's just who he was. He was a lead singer, I think, in a pop punk band coming out of school. Anyway, very interesting guy. But I knew him from before Creator Camp. And then the 3 other creators that were there, I actually met in September. Creator Camp put on this summit. We took 75 creators to Switzerland. That's a whole story in itself. But I met those 3 there. And I'd heard NECA has run and continues to run her own storytelling show. So I was like, oh, that's a lock. Like, that's super easy. Um, Hunter, because of the content that he makes, I was like, he's definitely got stories and he's really good at making people feel things and helping people understand
And
the
just
story.
and just to jump in there, tell us a little bit more about Hunter Prosper because he's a pretty significant creator too.
Sh Sure. Hunter, I would describe Hunter as like the new age humans of New York. For anyone listening, like that might ring a bell. I think the guy's name was Andrew Stanton or something like that. And he just started to document stories of average people he would find in New York. And that became a massive account. It was almost like an expose of just who makes up New York. And Hunter does that, but just for the world. He's very, very talented at asking the right questions in the right moment to help anyone and maybe even that individual understand themselves and tell their story better. And so he's been sharing, I think his most popular series is called Stories from a Stranger,
Yeah.
and he helps to share other people's stories worldwide. And so that guy's on an incredible tear. He's connecting people to humanity. He's connecting people again to their own stories. And so when I met him, again, it was a lock. I didn't think he was actually going to tell a story. I wanted him to interview people, but by the end, he was inspired because he's friends with a lot of the storytellers. So he was like, no, I'm game to tell a story. And then Kyle McCarthy was another guy that I met in Switzerland, and he's really good friends with Hunter and Blake. Hunter, Blake, Kyle are kind of like a threesome. They're just all homies. They're in like similar stages of life. They love each other. The way they think about things is great. And so Blake came on, and then the last storyteller, Melinda, um, Naka had met her or had seen her read a story at a previous storytelling event that she attended.
Yeah.
And when I asked the group, guys, I'm looking for one more storyteller who's someone that loves music or is into music, but also a great storyteller, immediately she's like, oh, you got to meet Melinda Hinton. And I'm so glad that Naked did introduce me to Melinda because Melinda's story was by far the craziest story of the night.
It was.
Um, so those five, so the reason there were heavy hitters is because that is just who I knew were great live storytellers. And it's nice that it happened that way. But as it stands right now, that is a that is the way it works is how can I find the right storytellers? And I have a couple indicators that I look for. And if they're semi-famous, cool. If they're people who work in a science lab on a bench, that's cool too. Like I don't care, but it's just how it worked out. The four out of the five that I knew in New York. Well, actually, I flew in two of them. But anyway, the four of the five that were there in New York are friends, and it's a lot of it is due to this creator camp network.
Yeah, and I think it's really exciting because usually when you go to a music event, it's going to be a concert or something like that. But in this case, you're really breaking the mold of how music can be performed live in a sense. So tell us a bit more about where that idea came from and how it first came to life. Because this isn't the first. I don't know exactly how many you've held, but obviously it's a concept you've been refining.
Yeah, I there's a couple things that I think happened over the past couple of years that led up to this idea. I think the first one is I came across VH1 Storytellers. VH1 Storytellers was this incredible format that was created by VH1 from 1996, I think, until 2013. And the idea was quite simple, yet quite brilliant. It was a small audience where an artist would come, and not only would they just play their songs, they would tell the story behind the song, and then they would play the song live. And I thought that was so cool. Like really gravitated towards it. The first one I saw was a John Mayer episode, and that guy's got an unbelievable ability to just speak off the cuff and make you feel something. So I saw that. I really liked that format. I think that was also the time that short form media started to pop, and you started to have channels like, "Hey man, what are you listening to on like?" And if someone's like, "Oh, I'm listening to Walk This Way, whatever," by Aerosmith, and you're like, "Oh, cool, thanks." Like I don't know like what that even means. Like why? What is that in the world? Like, is that what music discovery is now? Or the other side would be like, here are the top five songs you need to know if you're chilling on a on a Sunday talking to your friends on a podcast on a brown couch. And they'd give you like five song recommendations. And it's like, great, but the discovery mechanism is so high with streaming platforms that the feeling was it's not about finding music that you love. I think it's so easy to find music that you love. I think it's the idea that, and then this came into my second realization that I think there's two types of music fans. And I think there's fans that will just listen to a song and it's the musicality and it's the messaging and it's how it hits them that like really, really connects with them.
Yeah.
And then there's other fans, and I think those, and this is where I fall, which context just makes the song sound better.
Yeah.
Understanding the human, understanding why they do what they do, the background, etc. And I've always gravitated towards that, and I've always wanted more of that in the world because my favorite artist, John Bellion, is an exact prime example of it,
Mhm.
in terms of like how he became my favorite artist. And so it was seeing VH1 storytellers, being a little frustrated with how TikTok and music discovery was happening today. It was knowing how much I love to discover artists when there's context and there's worlds built around a song and how much easier and how it transports and transforms a song.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last thing, there were a couple other factors, but I'd say the last important factor was the idea that an artist writes a song and performs a song because that is what they are so fucking talented at, and that is how they're able to like magically communicate something to the world.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they might not be, and they don't have to be great storytellers. Their music is the storytelling. They don't have to stand up in front of an audience and tell a great story about their song and how it came to be for 10 minutes. And I found a lot of the artists that I would listen to, like when you watch like Genius Verified and they're telling the story behind their lyrics, they're not good storytellers. They'll just like they're either quirky or they're passionate or whatever. And the thought then came to, okay, well, Maggie Rogers, one of my favorite artists, always says that when she releases her album and her work into the world, it's not hers anymore because
Right.
anyone can interpret it and take it the way they want. And that's kind of what she loves. It's beautiful to then observe how people take and use and find interest in that music. And so all these ideas were spinning around till like one day it was like, I think 2023 or so, or like October 2023 or 2022, something like that. And a friend of mine had tweeted something on, or back when it was Twitter, but I'd posted something on Twitter related to I think Kid Cudi, and I know Kid Cudi, of course, but I've never been a big fan, and so I think I messaged him back being like, "Okay, give me 5 songs that I wouldn't know and why." And he hit me, he's like, "Oh, do this, do this, do this, do this," and I started walking, and as I started walking, I was listening to these tracks, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." Like I like really enjoyed this type of discovery, and then we had a conversation after, and then I think we called each other and we're like, we should just find a way to bring more music fans together just to talk around music
Yeah.
because it's so enjoyable. So that led to me running, I'd call them living room show. They're not even shows, but living room hangs where I'd bring 5 to 6 to 7 music fans together. Everyone would bring a story related to a song that they loved, and we would share those songs and stories together. And those nights would go for 4.5 hours, and like strangers would start off telling stories about how they like came out to their parents and how like they immigrated from a country where they didn't speak English and how they were trying to find confidence in a world that they didn't know. Like crazy things for strangers to just share. And it was amazing. The thing that just kept gnawing at me was like around story 4 or story 3, people kind of just, you felt the disinterest. Everyone was just like, we just want to hang and share music and talk about like our own stories, but not get up and share a story.
Mm.
And I realized it was because the stories weren't told well. So it
Yeah.
was just like more people speaking about their experience with music compared to someone really being able to build a world, and you visually and and through an auditory sense have been able to like jump into it, and then the song plays and you get transported. And so that came to, okay, hang on, there's a much bigger vision here. I want to take this around the world. Like I want it to be VH1 storytellers, but I want it to be the fans telling the stories. I don't care for live performance, and it's actually interesting if it's not live performance because then you get to hear the song exactly how it's intended.
Yeah.
Um, and that came to, okay, I got to start doing this and putting this live and ticketing it and building an audience and pre-selecting storytellers so the stories are really, really good.
And
And that's,
one
yeah,
question I have is
yeah,
all the storytellers, I don't know if this was intentional, but if you look at NECA and Hunter and Blake, and maybe we can revisit some of the themes that they talked about. So I remember that NECA's story was based on, was it the death of her grandfather, right?
yeah, the death of her great uncle, or but like, yeah, grandfather-esque, yeah,
Yes, and Hunter's story was also based on the death of a family member, his grandfather.
yeah,
Blake's was based on the death of a friend. Melinda
mm,
was based on the death of a friendship, and Kyle
yeah,
was based on the death of a friend. A lot of
yeah,
right, a lot of very heavy topics, a lot of grieving.
yeah, yeah. It
Okay.
was, yeah. So again, this is stuff that I'm testing out to figure out what is the best hero format? Like what is down to every single detail, like what would make this show technically perfect? And what I tested or what I'm testing right now is, do you give a container to a show, or do you just tell people come with a song, an incredible story, and share it? And so New York's, the theme was actually family,
Wow.
but but I said like take it however you'd like. And it's funny it's funny in a way, but I think it also makes a lot of sense that um, death and loss and grievance makes you feel like it. I feel like it puts you. It makes you like a sponge for all your emotions a lot of the time, or you're numb to it. But then as you revisit it, like all those feelings rush back. And so I think it was funny to see how so much of it was like the end of something, the death of something. But I said family, which again was interesting. This time, I'm doing a show, the next show in Toronto, March 13th. I'm not going to give any idea to anyone.
Mm.
and I just want to see what happens. The stories I'm sure will be great. Um, but there was family, but I wasn't, and this is the last thing that I've been thinking about over time is do I go do I purposely find do I go family and then do I find a comedic story, two sad stories, and like two inspiring stories if
Yeah.
I'm able to do so. Like that's another question is like do I go down to that detail? But yeah, there was that container, and it is interesting how it ended up being a lot of a lot of death.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because I think in a lot of ways, those songs were still so closely tied to the stories that they were telling, right?
Mm,
So, and I think even though a lot of the stories that were told that evening were sadder stories, it didn't seem like the evening was heavy or anything because folks were still really excited to, I think, just dive into the idea and the concept that music can be used in this way. And Paul, I know we did an episode about music and memory and also like how music kind of influences emotion. So those are concepts that we explore a lot on this podcast.
hmm, hmm. You know what's interesting is I've been trying to explore music therapy and understanding music therapy. For anyone listening, music therapy is considered using music for goals that are non-music related. So a lot of the time you're going to see it it's a subset of therapy, but a lot of the time you're going to see it in areas where you're rehabilitating someone or you're getting someone to try get to a baseline that they have either not been fortunate to get to or something has happened in their life and they're getting over that hurdle. And so it's usually going from like negative to like little positive. But I think what's crazy is with the show, the feedback I got often was, oh man, that story unlocked so many and like songs and memories for me that I forgot about after like listening to other people's stories and songs and feeling those emotions. And so the thought very much is I think I really am trying to study what music therapy is, and specifically, there's a section of music therapy called receptive music therapy, where
Yeah.
like that's all about listening and like using listening patterns to be able to get to certain goals. I bet you there's like ways and there's like clinical understandings and underpinnings of psychology that like can be brought into the show to make people feel even more. I don't know if I want to make people feel any more, but like to your point about how man, like
It's everything.
it's magic, man. It's magic to hear about some of these anecdotes where someone was on their deathbed and they had dementia and their family like was around the bed and they couldn't talk coherently with their loved one, and the next thing like they played the song from the loved one's like wedding, like their wedding song, and like the loved one like like clued in and knew what that song was and knew where it was from. Like that's crazy, or how people will go through trauma and then almost become mute, and then people will use songs and singing to get people to get back into their voice, and they'll get them to start singing to a song, and the next thing
Wow.
it's singing like things they want to say, and then it's talking things that like
Wow.
I don't know, dude. It's a little it's cool to study it, but I'm with you guys that it's fascinating.
Yeah, that what you just said is not as intense of an example, but it just makes me think of a few weeks ago. I was home for the holidays and I was driving with my dad, and I was playing. So my parents are from Nigeria,
Nice.
and my dad, you're familiar with Fela Kuti?
Yeah.
Yeah, like probably one of the biggest artists to ever come out of Africa. So my dad
Mm,
actually got the chance to see him live at the end of high school in
yeah.
Lagos.
Wow. I never knew that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was playing so obviously like the music I play if I'm driving with my parents, it's gonna be I'm trying to connect with them. So it's gonna be that type of music.
Yeah.
And I'm not as familiar with Fela, but I just like my dad is not really the most like emotionally expressive person. But I put on um I forget the name of the song, but I put on one of the songs, and they're known for having like 7 minute long intros and then he starts singing.
Yeah.
And um so we were kind of just driving in silence for the length of the intro, and then once he started singing, my dad, who like I said, man a few words, definitely not getting in front of people and singing, just like word for word says like start singing along with him and was like, yeah, I saw this live.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I feel like there are songs that I can think of now where 20 years down the line, if I'm talking about them to, my future child or something like that, I know that I would have a lot to say.
Yeah, man, I'm with you guys. I'm with you guys. Like to think of, I don't have a family yet, nowhere close, but to think of the days where like you can experience like a music memory with your kid together, crazy. But then also I think about this a lot, like the stuff we're listening to now, what's going to stand the test of time, and like what's going when we're 50 and our kids are however old, and the song right now that's been top of mind that I'm like, this is definitely going to stand test of time. This is going to be like Ella Fitzgerald, Elvis Presley type stuff, is Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish. And I'm like, when I hear this in like 25 years, it's going to be interesting where Billie's going to be 47 or whatever. And my kids are going to know Billie is like this 40-year-old. Yet we're going to remember the SoundCloud rise and Ocean Eyes, and then and when Birds of a Feather came out, like when she just had 9 Grammys, not a bajillion, and like
Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter,
Espresso.
things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So,
man.
so what do you think is what influences whether or not a song is going to stand the test of time?
I wish I could give a great answer.
Yeah.
Um, what I can say is when I heard Birds of a Feather, it just felt perfect. Like I can't describe it in any other way. Like it just felt perfect. Um, and I think a lot of it is feeling, but then a lot of like standing test of time, I think is based on two things. If we look at some patterns, I think one is the controlled media outlets. Like what is getting played so often, because familiarity and consistency is definitely factored into if you like a song or not. It's like I remember James Fauntleroy, an amazing songwriter and an artist, was saying there's no such thing as a hit, there's such thing as a great song, and then a marketing budget makes a great hit.
Wow.
And or not a great hit, but makes a hit. And so I do believe it's interesting to look back, okay, it was really just radio. It was radio, or it was like syncs on TV shows or advertisements and such that like really, really like captured the audience and captured our hearts and minds. Now, sure, there's TikTok tracks, but there's TikTok tracks that popped that like I don't think any of us are really going to remember in a couple of years. So what stands test of time? Well, I think it's one that has like the most power and most eyeballs onto it. Like why at weddings, or I'm Jewish, like why like bar and bat mitzvahs, do you still have like Marvin Gaye, Ain't No Mountain High Enough playing, and like what like why do you still have that?
Yeah.
I feel like again that it was outlets back in the day, supply and demand, I think is one. And I think two is one is like, well, what I mean, the second thing is, well, what is a cultural moment? You look at like Stranger Things with Kate Beck, I think, like running up the hill, that one moment where like one of the I forget the character's name, but like she's almost like levitating and getting pulled up by like the devil. Like that song came right back into the zeitgeist, and then everyone knew. Or you look at like Dogface 4200 with Ocean Spray, like
That's exactly the next example I was thinking about with the Fleetwood Mac song "Dreams" as he was skating
it,
the cranberry juice.
Yeah. Or what's it called? Murder on the Dance Floor with Salt Bay.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
like exactly. There's definitely like moments of things, because I think then it creates ripple effects. Like
Yeah.
if if a lot of people hear and have a feeling towards a track, they're most likely to either play that song or use that song. I
Yeah.
think now it's interesting to look at the idea of gatekeepers, because now what is a gatekeeper? Where do we have gatekeepers? Who really
Right.
gets to influence music? But it's the influences. I think it's the influences of music, and then I'd like to say that it has to be a great song. But what does that even mean? I don't even know. Um, but Birds of a Feather, man.
Yeah. All right. So we were talking about other, I believe, and then
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think leads to music standing the test of time?
I There was a point you made about cultural moments, and I would co-sign that. Like, if there's something outside of the song itself that was significant, that enough people around the world knew was going on, and then that song happened to be associated with it in some way, then I think that will help it stand the test of time.
yeah, what I want to add on to that is the example I would use would be "Not Like Us."
I was literally just
I
about
know,
to
and
say
that's
that.
why I added that because I could tell that that's what you were hinting at. And it's interesting because like among friends, we've been having the debate as to whether or not Kendrick Lamar will play "Not Like Us" at the Super Bowl, and I know that this is relevant to you because you're a Toronto native, Danny. But it's just interesting because that song I think it symbolized a lot more. That whole moment in hip hop symbolized a lot more than just a song. It became about ideologies. So I think that that's something that will definitely stand the test of time. And then obviously people who work on it. So for example, you have DJ Mustard, you have one of the Pulitzer Prize winning rapper, those types of things. And I think as we get older, those are just part of the reason that we carry a story with us about that song.
So with you. Yeah, I mean that I'm so interested to know that too. Also, like he sold out 3 nights in Toronto, and whenever I forget when he's coming this year, um, I'm just interested. Man, that's sold out so fast, and I think it's funny with Canadians, especially people in Toronto. Like you don't want to say, yeah, Kendrick won, because to be honest, a lot of the time Drake hasn't had such like affinity to Toronto. Like he's like down in Houston being a fan of like the Kentucky Wildcats, and you're like, yo, what the fuck's going on? Or not in Houston, but he's like down in Houston, and then Kentucky Wildcats, and then he's like in another country, like rocking another team's thing and
Yeah.
showing love. And so and Drake is worldwide. Like no one can touch this guy. His strategy again, it's like two very different artists again clashing. Um, but Kendrick won, no doubt.
Yeah.
Um, is Drake still incredible? Does he still have hits? Will he continue to have hits? 100%.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, what's going to happen on the global stage? Because like that's global. Like Kendrick doesn't get paid. This Super Bowl artists don't get paid to play, and
Yeah.
so you're going to use that moment. I hope he's going to use that moment because like that would just be fun. Just sting, like add one more sting. Like see
Right.
what else could come from adding one more sting.
Right. So one thing we definitely want to pick your brain about is the concept of the creator space and how that relates to independent artists, breaking artists. And I think it's really serendipitous that we have you on the podcast today, because I don't know if this happened over the border for you in Canada, but yesterday evening, actually, TikTok was I don't want to say it was canceled, but it stopped working.
And then
Yeah,
today, a few hours ago, now if you open up TikTok, you get a message saying thank you to President Trump for working with us to bring this back. You can now share and create as you've been doing before.
Right. And
yeah,
I think two reasons why that's really important. So earlier we were talking about Billie Eilish and Ocean Eyes and how that song exploded on SoundCloud. And SoundCloud has been replaced by TikTok for this generation in terms of where artists are broken. The
Mm.
other part is that SoundCloud, and I'm sure that there's a lot that you can kind of speak to about this, but sorry, TikTok was really significant in terms of the creator economy and helping folks to get paid and becoming a platform that actually allowed people to leverage their audience in that sense. And so thinking about TikTok disappearing was actually scary for a lot of people, not only because musicians are being able to break into the mainstream, but also because of the livelihoods it provides for them.
mm,
So what are your thoughts on how an artist today can actually break? Has TikTok been for the better or for worse? And
yeah,
building narratives on those platforms.
yeah. It's interesting, man. It's interesting, and I respond like this because I am someone who is biased towards longevity and biased towards artist or creator development. Like, yes, I'm in the creator space. I don't focus on artists. I love music clearly, but it's interesting how because of how quickly things can change and how quickly someone can rise and fall, the concept of artist development or creator development really goes out the window
Yeah.
since a lot of the industry is so venture capital focused. Like let's sign 100. We know five are gonna go crazy. We know 15 will be solid. Everyone else will kind of go to shit.
Yeah.
But that's cool because we have the five, and then we'll just put our whole teams around those five to make sure they are everywhere and they get everything that they need.
Yeah.
Um, but taking bets in the music industry has never been like that's not foreign to the music industry. There's actually a really cool podcast episode on it was a podcast that used to run called Reply All, and it was called The Case of the Missing Hit. And it
Mhm.
was about how there was this guy who grew up in Arizona, and he remembers hearing the song so vividly, and he remembers all the lyrics and the tones and the melody, and he can't find that song for like the life of him. And so the producers end up trying to figure out where does the song exist? Does it exist? Why does it exist? And what you come to realize as a spoiler alert is that a lot of the time in the past, like 70s, 80s, 90s, the way that they would start testing records to see if their so-called investment would be worth it is they would like sign an artist, they'd get them to send in a couple demos. They'd send those demos to like tier 3 markets. They'd see if there's any pickup with those songs in those markets. And if not, they would just like shelf the artist.
Yeah.
So you like, and you'd never hear about the artist ever again. And I think you're seeing a similar feeling here in with TikTok and with the way that again a lot of these labels are just distributing their dollars or distributing their investments to see who pops. That being said, there is an extremely powerful use case to the independent artist who's also great at understanding the internet or making TikToks and making content, looking at people like Nick D, looking at not Thomas Price, what's his name? No, his last name's Price. I think his brother's name's Thomas. Anyway, um, wow, I can see his face. Anyway, like those guys that are so good and that have come out and said that they don't release a song until they have an incredible content idea
Yeah.
around it. Because like that could be like that's essentially the new music video. And
Yeah.
so yes, TikTok has given life to artists, to songs that are incredible.
Yeah.
It has given anyone an independent opportunity to go crazy. SoundCloud definitely had that opportunity. Other platforms had that opportunity. This was on a whole new level, because when TikTok bought Musically and they combined together in whatever 2016, 17, um, the
Throwback.
underpinnings of this, yeah, the underpinnings of this app were music. Like music was everything to this app. So the behavior was there. I think the focus was there. And it definitely did something for the industry, did something for artists that no one's ever seen before.
Yeah.
Um, the thing that I revel on and try to figure out is, well, what about like where's the longevity going to come from? Because I don't want an artist to come here today and then leave tomorrow. Like I want to grow with an artist. I want to hear 8, 9, 10 albums over time. Um, and I remember going to a Ty Verde show. I don't know if you guys remember that guy. Like he's saying drugs and he's saying what was the other big song? Um I'm blanking on it, but he was a big TikTok artist. He was a worker at Verizon. He was a sales rep at Verizon and then started to put out his own tracks and his tracks went crazy and he was the guy in the car and whatever. I remember I went to his concert and a lot of people knew like 2 or 3 of the songs, but like where the fuck's Ty Verde's today? Like
Right.
I have no idea. And so like that thing, and I think about this on the creator side all the time. Like I care about longevity. I want to see the creator I love today be around for 30, 40, 50 years. Because if you've got something to say, if you're such a creative vessel, then we need you in the world. Like I want you creating. So it's this double-edged sword of having a platform that can make things go stupid viral, which means that they can also fall really, really quickly. And you have I'll end off on this, is I remember listening to a Cole Bennett interview, and he was saying that someone asked him, how is it that you're so good at picking talent? Like it always seems like the artists that you start working with and you shoot for end up blowing up.
That's true, actually.
And his answer was like his answer was interesting. His answer was like, honestly, I don't know. I just like picked artists that I love. So he must have great taste. And I do believe that. Like I don't think he goes into much thinking beyond like, is this guy cool? Is this girl cool? Like this is all I care for. But the thing he was saying is he's like, but I feel so bad for the people that see success way too early because that is like that could be a career killer purely from the mental side because you're not ready for it. And if you're not ready for it, again, that's where artist development was so cool and so powerful is you get them in the room with writers and you get them opening up for smaller acts and you get their live performance there and you get them working on their sound until everyone in the room is like, cool, we're ready to go. Like I
Yeah.
was listening to the J. Cole 10-part interview series with him, Ede, and Scott Laser that they put out before the 10-year anniversary of Forest Hills Drive. And you heard his frustration when he was like, Jay wouldn't let me put out the Sideline Story without a single. And it's because like the label wanted everything to feel so ready before they really pushed him.
Yeah.
That all to say again, where there's trade-offs in everything. How great is it with TikTok? It's huge. The fact that you were going to potentially take it away, I think is fucking crazy, especially for what they were like alleging that what like TikTok is using cyber warfare to be able to change the minds of America, like fucking crazy shit. But then also, I kind of go, Trump and his PR team, I think, are fucking incredible because you let the app die for a second and then it goes, nope, Trump's gonna sign an executive order to put like, guy's a hero again. He's nearly assassinated and he comes up with a strong fist and he's like, nothing will kill me. And then TikTok dies, but he's the guy to like take it from the grave. I think his team's amazing or he's amazing, whatever. Um,
Hey, you're not from this country, so
but yeah,
you can speak
yeah.
freely.
I'm not like
Yeah, I'll have perspective. It's fair.
Yeah, but so I said a lot there. Some really, really cool things. Um, some annoying things. But as I'll reiterate, I always look at things with a lens of like longevity.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know what it does, but for the couple of cases where people were ready and they were ready for the moment and they popped off and they were able to take it and rise with it, fuck yeah. Fuck
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because speaking about artists who blow up too early and have too much access to a fan base, but they don't have the body of work to back it up. I think about Steve Lacy, right?
Mm,
No, I know why. I know because you're thinking of Bad Habits,
Yeah.
and because you were talking about how people only knew a few songs when you saw that guy, and then that's what happened with him. Steve Lacy is an interesting case because he's been in the game for a long time with the internet. But it was just like once TikTok became an avenue for him to like push that song out, then he fell into that trap.
Right.
mm,
That's I think that's a really good clarification because there's some artists who they have that body work, but their fans only heard one song.
That was the problem, yeah.
true. I think what's interesting too is you look at how people use TikTok. And I actually love when artists use TikTok purely as a tool. Like I've seen a bunch of artists that will create 100 videos and it's 100 slight edits to like the same essence of a video with their song in the background and they post all 100 because the idea is it doesn't matter if a couple people are like, what do you mean you keep posting the same shit? No one's really going on feed and scrolling and trying to learn your stuff or figure out your stuff. The majority is, well, you just need one to pop. And once the one pops, then it's reaching so many people and you have that influx. And so it's nice, again, to see how I've recently been listening to this audiobook. Well, it's a book, but I've been listening to the audiobook of by David Byrne, who's part of the Talking Heads. It's called How Music Works. Um, and he talks about how the environment and technology always informs the sound and always informs what's popular. And
Yeah.
I think you look at TikTok and yeah, that is a tool to reach the masses. And who cares if you're not cool with it? But I remember Ty Verdes being like, just get in your car and sing the song to the camera in your car and do it over and over and over and over. And maybe one video kind of hits a couple tens of thousands. Great. That puts you in a very different stratosphere. And so how it's used to your point about like the Steve Lacy element, it's like it's even the same, and I'll bring it back to my favorite artist, John Bellion. He's quoted by saying his song in 20 off his first major record label album called The Human Condition, I think it was 2015 or 2016. There's a song called All Time Low, and that went a little dummy.
Oh,
And
love, oh,
it,
love, 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 love.
exactly,
I
right?
got you.
Exactly, exactly. And someone's like, man, like, what did you think about that? Like, it went crazy, right? And he was like, yeah, but it's such a false positive because it goes crazy and you think everyone's going to love all of your music. And the next time you drop and the next time you tour it, you're going to have like incredible growth in fandom. He's like, but really how you have to see it is it reached so many eyeballs, so cool. I got a couple more like true fans from
Yeah.
it, but I don't care about the hundreds of millions of streams that came from it because those aren't going to amount to anything. And I guess maybe it's for Steve Lacy too. Like he was on his rise, he was doing his thing. It popped, Bad Habits popped. Once it popped, cool. A lot of people knew him. He got bigger opportunities, and cool. That's just like more opportunity for the average person to find his stuff and go, oh wow, this guy in his entirety is really really cool. But I think it's hard to see past that when you see a number like, oh, I have 100, I have a million views, but I can only sell like 50 tickets. Like I don't get it.
Yeah.
And it's looking at it in like the right, I think the with the right lens.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can kill yourself, man.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because there are so many other names that could fit into this whole
So many.
example of social media not necessarily being in their best interest. Like I don't know what happened to Dominic Fike. I think he was someone that was really big in 2020, and then all of a sudden just kind of loses some of that steam. But I
So,
think
well, the interesting thing on Dominic Fike, do you remember Dominic Fike from 2018?
I don't.
Was
Okay,
that was that was phone numbers
that was after. So
okay.
like 2018 was when Dominic Fike came out with Three Nights, like Three Nights at the
Oh,
motel
okay, yeah,
on the
yeah.
street lights. When that came out, that I remember that going crazy because in 2018, 2019, I was trying to get into the business side of the music industry, and I remember that song going dumb and the narratives of oh his uncle is actually someone that worked at Columbia, and so when he got out of jail, da 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 da, and then he kind of went away, and then he came back. Um, and I think it's again, it's so relative to it. It's like Ramon, like where you came into his journey
Yeah.
versus like I thought he was done after 3 nights, but then
Yeah.
he came back with this incredible track, and he's been working a lot with Kenny and a bunch of others, and I'm like, oh, he's here to stay.
Yeah.
Whereas like you're like, no, 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 like where did this guy go? He's out, and that's what's interesting about the internet is like the internet is so fragmented
Yeah. And
that
then he got on Euphoria, so that definitely like
true,
brought him.
true. True.
Yeah.
Such a good point. I think that it also goes to when you look at culture today. I had a friend say this to me, and I was like, you know, this is kind of true. It's like it's so hard to find someone that is like so into everything you're into. Because
Yeah.
there's so many pockets and angles and worlds and influences that you can get to. There's not like a monoculture, which is good, but it's also bad. And you meet someone and you're like, oh, you're a Steve Lacy fan? Oh, sick. Who else do you like? And you're like, oh, because I love The Weeknd. And they're like, oh, I love like Fela Kuti. And you're like, who's that? Right?
Yeah.
Like it'll just go so different. Or the question of how often do we get the question, oh, what music do you love?
Everything
And you're like
except
everything except
country and heavy metal.
that's what see that's what's crazy though is you don't go, oh, jazz is my shit, hip hop's my shit. You go, well, like I kind of like a lot of this, but I hate, and then you'll give like country and like classics and something else.
Yeah.
um but again, it's the environment and it's the technology of having access to like a bajillions amount of songs. And the last story I'll give on this is I threw a dinner in Toronto for creatives maybe 5, 6 months ago, and creators at the table, and I was talking to her about music, and she's like, yeah, I love R&B. And I was like, oh, incredible. Like, who do you listen to? And she goes, I actually have no idea. I just like love the R&B playlist that Spotify makes for me, and I listen to that over and over and over. And I was like, so
Mm.
like Amber Mark? She's like, I don't know who that is. I was like, Georgia Smith, no idea who that is. And like, I was so confused. But she
Yeah.
had like this like reverence for R&B,
Yeah.
but she has no idea what she has reverence for beyond the set. Like,
But I think
Yeah.
people just consume music differently, and I think that that's
for sure.
that continues to surprise me and also excite me because like a lot of the stuff I'm working on right now is focused on folks who want to interact with music in a spatial sense, right? And be able to
Mm,
see music from around the world. And not everybody wants to digest music like that.
so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, and it's exactly everyone, as long as they can hear something and know that it's good, it doesn't necessarily matter if they know the specific subgenre. Like I remember, just to give like an example, when there was the Meet the Creators event last year and I
Mm,
was DJing, I I was trying it. I remember I think you specifically said to like make sure that there's like the TikTok songs that are hot, but then also like I still have to play what's mine.
yeah.
And so I remember like, people would come up and acknowledge me and they'd be like, "Oh, you're killing it." And I'm playing like what was big back then? Like um oh, off the deep end. That Sleepy Hollow song. That was like the biggest song at that time. But then I remember I decided to slide in the Travis Scott remix of Swang by Ray Shremmerd. And
Mm.
this one creator specifically came up to me and was like, "Yo, how do you know this?" And I'm like, "Yes.
Yeah.
This is why I played this, so that there would be someone who would
Mm.
be on the same wavelength, even if like other people are just like, oh, it sounds nice,
It hits the right people.
Yeah.
Um, so I know I wish we had infinite time to continue to talk, and I think we'll have to have you back on the podcast. But one thing I want to do before we sign off, is talk about what song you would tell a story about. So I know Paul, you chose
Mm.
and you chose one. If one of you wants to go, and we can give a salute to playlist storytellers in that way.
For sure. Paul, you want to go first?
Sure. I've actually mentioned this song on a previous episode of our podcast. I would say "The Art of Peer Pressure" by Kendrick Lamar, because
Mm.
although I have not experienced what Kendrick Lamar has experienced, nor have I been in that exact situation of the homies robbing a house and then I have to go along with it because I'm there. I definitely can relate to times in my past where I felt like I needed to do what I needed to do to fit in the moment. even though it seemed like maybe I shouldn't be doing this. So I'm gonna
Mm.
go with that.
I love that, man. I love that. The song that came to mind immediately for me is Everyone Knows, or everyone, is it Everyone or Everybody? I think it's Everyone Knows by NERD. Um, and that was a track I remember I heard growing up. I was the oldest. It was me and a younger sister, and so I never had like the older sibling influence of like what was cool.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember there was a kid in a family on our street who I would hang out with the middle child all the time, and the older brother who was 2 years older than me. I never looked at him like a big brother, but reflecting back, like I think I took influence as if he was like the big cooler kid he'd go to the concerts where we didn't have money to. He would go out at night downtown when we were up in like the burbs of Toronto, and we wouldn't be able to. And I remember and music was big-ish for us. I remember we listened to like top 40, like the top 40 countdown Saturday mornings and talk about music and always buy CDs at the time. But I do remember the time where his older brother started to get into NERD and he played Everyone Knows. And it starts off with like all the girls standing in the line for the bathroom. And like it's this weird, like again, it's Pharrell. So it's like this in Chad Hugo, it's like this weird mix of 2/3 worlds with crazy 808s and weird swings. And I remember listening to that track going, this is whack. But like Jordan, but Jordan likes it. And if Jordan likes it, two things are probably true. No one else around me and no one in my grade probably knows it.
Yeah.
And two, if he likes it, there must be some element of like cool to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Some merit.
and I remember I've always like I struggled with that song for so long because I wanted to like it because he liked it.
Yeah.
Uh, Having like what is influence and what does influence mean? And it's so powerful, especially when you're young in your formative years. But that song now is a song that I actually do really enjoy and I really value. And then seeing piece by piece, like the Pharrell Lego documentary, it wasn't in there. But learning about the days and like seeing those days where that album was made, reflective, but in a visual was so cool. And so like that song is always like the grappling of stay true to what you love. Like don't let anyone else tell you what you love. Like the best are self-discoveries, but there is something interesting to sitting with a piece of art or sitting with someone for something for a really long time and that thing then eventually going from bad to good just because of time spent with it, which is just art in general.
Yeah.
Um, and I just wish I had an older brother to give me really good music taste.
Yeah, yeah. I think my song is gonna be "Land Down Under" from Men at Work, and I was trying to think of a
I don't
different
know.
song, but this is a song that just came to
That's so
mind.
left field,
And so let
yo.
me tell you the story. So, in high school, I went on an exchange trip to Sydney, Australia, and one of the things we had to do before this exchange trip was we had to learn about the culture. And I took it upon myself to go and find some music from Sydney, Australia. And I came upon the group Men at Work. And I loved the song Land Down Under so much that it was the only song that I found by them. And so we were on a bus riding from Sydney to Melbourne, I believe. No, Sydney to Brisbane, because that was another city we were visiting. And at
Yeah,
one
City
point,
Melbourne be OD.
yeah, it's like another couple hundred miles. This man knows his geography.
Yeah.
And so they're like, did anybody have any Australian music on their iPod? And it was my time to shine because I was the only person that had a song. So I connect my iPod and they're playing Land Down Under, but it was the only song that I had. So it just kept on repeating and repeating and repeating. And now at this point, as I've gotten older, like I've actually taken the time to explore Men at Work's discography. I've taken the chance to look at some of Colin Hayes' independent work, and like I've actually taken a really deep dive, and I love
Hmm.
Australian folk music, not just Australian pop music. Um,
Interesting. Okay, Man Down Under, Land Down Under,
yeah, Land Down Under. I'll send it, and
Man
maybe
at
you know what
Work.
we're gonna do? We're gonna have that be the outro song to this episode. It has
Hell
to.
yeah. Hell
I
yeah.
feel like you've probably heard it before.
You'll
It's
know. Yeah,
definitely it's like a classic. It's from like the 80s, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an earworm.
Yeah.
Dude,
On the other side.
and see, like, this is the best thing about it. This is the best thing about it is like if you told me that story and then right now I played it, like, I would probably really take to that track versus if I just heard it, I might say it's cool or I might be like, this is kind of whack.
Yeah.
but like the context
You have the context now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah, well,
It's
that's the
crazy.
fun as well. But it's been so awesome having you, Danny. I think you're a wealth of knowledge. I'm so excited to see, you know, TikTok 2.0. It still exists. So obviously, you know, you're gonna continue to guide people in their creative careers in that sense and help them just like level up as creators and also host the playlist storytellers. Hopefully we'll be at the one in Toronto. I'll try to make it. Excited to see you in the city again.
You're welcome to. Boys, thank you so much for inviting me on. Thank you for indulging me in this and keep doing this. I love this. The next time, yeah, next time either when I come to New York, we got to do it in person, or if you guys fly to Toronto for whatever reason, maybe play with storytellers or something else pops up in life, we'll definitely do it in person, same camera angles, same audio, and not have to figure out Zoom on a Sunday.
Awesome.
It's
Appreciate
been a
you.
pleasure, man.
Cool.
Take care.